My husband of 20 years, Michael, was cheating on me with our son's 18-year-old girlfriend, Madison. It felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so profound it shattered my world. Let me back up. I'm 41, a stay-at-home mom. Michael, 48, works in finance, or so I thought. We have two amazing kids, Jacob, our 18-year-old son, and Emily, our 15-year-old daughter. Jacob and Madison had been together since freshman year. She was practically family. Then last week I saw it, a text on Michael's phone from Madison. Something about missing sucking his cock. I felt sick. I told myself I was wrong, but deep down I knew. The following days were a blur of sickening discoveries, a hidden folder on his computer filled with BDSM pictures of Madison from her Instagram, more texts, cruel jokes at my expense, him calling me fat and old while Madison LOL'd along. I found a thing last month that wasn't mine. I'd been so naive. My so-called husband wasn't just cheating, but doing it with our son's first love. A girl he supposedly cared for like a daughter. The thong, a cheap, lacy thing, mocked me from the corner of our bedroom. It was a constant reminder of his betrayal, a physical manifestation of his disgust for me. Had he left it there intentionally? Was it some twisted power play? The realization hit me like a wave of nausea. He wanted me to find it. He wanted me to suffer, to know he was sleeping with a much younger woman, to feel like an old, frumpy mom who could no longer hold his attention. It was a brutal, emotional cruelty that sliced far deeper than the physical betrayal itself. I've aged, I'll be the first to admit, and motherhood has taken its toll. But that didn't give him permission to compare me to a younger woman and throw it at me like insults during those texts that he shared with Madison. I tried to breathe, to function. I made lunches, drove Emily to school, but inside I was screaming. The image of those texts, Madison's words, played on repeat in my mind. How could he do this to Jacob, to Emily, to me, to our family? He'd sit at the dinner table, pretending to be the loving father and husband, discussing Jacob's college plans, asking Emily about her day, while secretly fantasizing about another young woman, his own son's girlfriend. I found some form of normalcy in being around my brother and his family members, like his wife and their two children. It was just a facade, to hide the chaos inside that felt heavy and painful. His wife had a deep suspicion that something might be unusual, since we always had regular Zoom calls, and the recent change in conversation was very uncharacteristic of us over the years that we have been related by marriage, she asked. But I had given some lame excuse, but thankfully they were able to help in picking kids from school since Michael wasn't available to go pick them up when they arrived, and Jacob wasn't picking calls either as he needed a break. So after much internal struggle, I took refuge at my brother's place and shared the incident, and it made both my brother and his wife furious and heartbroken, especially due to the potential harm Jacob and Emily was put through. The kids, Jacob and Emily, realized the shift from our house to their uncle's, but I tried my best to reassure them to calm their fears, as they knew and sensed the air thick with tension in that small household where my cries and wail never seemed to end. The confrontation over Zoom was surreal. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, how I would remain calm, in control, but the moment I saw his face, red, sweating, his eyes shifting between panic and fury, all composure evaporated. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain, but shouted over and over, "Context!" as if the context mattered. He accused me of taking his kids. Then, abruptly, disconnected, he left the Zoom. My tears overflowed, and my trembling wouldn't stop. It wasn't just the revelation, it was the cruelty, the audacity of blaming me and storming away from the scene of the crime while putting a child's innocent life in danger by exploiting their vulnerabilities as a teenager and now as a young adult with mental distress issues. My brother, thank God for him, was there. He held me as I sobbed and tried to understand how he could have done such thing. He swore revenge upon Michael and Madison as his words felt sharp like venom. Later, still trembling, still trying to control my gasps between cries and tears, I saw Jacob's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Emily followed. Emily cried, holding her elder brother Jacob in deep slumber, his face pale with visible tears rolling from the side, but she kept whispering things, holding back sobs so Jacob wouldn't get disturbed and wake up, as my heart clenched with deep ache to see the pain Jacob muttered and rolled over to check Emily's age. Eyes if there might be tears or if Emily's trying to hide them. Emily stayed with her brother for that night, holding him in slumber until both of them finally drifted off to sleep. I looked at Emily, my precious daughter. The girl who once loved going on fishing trips with her dad now couldn't stand to see her father in pictures. The trust, the happy bond, the fond memories, irrevocably ruined due to her dad's selfish pursuit and pleasure at someone who's barely of legal age, our son's girlfriend no less, and his partner's age of 18 years, who should have treated Emily like a younger sister since they were together for 3 years. The innocence of youth, of having parents she could look up to, now turned to ash, burned up in the toxic fumes of betrayal. It felt cruel, deeply emotionally cruel. Emily suddenly was also having a change of emotions towards me, from loving me to finding ways to be angry and irritated about everything, snapping with harsh words and behaviors because Michael had said similar unkind words about me too, when talking about me to Madison. Now Emily, at some point, has come to realize those words in all earnestness. Emily now finds me as a figure of disappointment, shame, and guilt, the embodiment of weakness. That feeling, that anger towards my husband, towards that girl who once I considered my family, towards myself for not noticing the cruel, insidious signs. It solidified into resolve. I wouldn't just divorce him, I would dismantle him. I would unleash a torrent of fury on their lives, carefully calculated to avenge my broken heart, my innocent children's crushed souls, and restore dignity in my life after facing such betrayal, deceit, and shame for way too many years. Justice wasn't enough. I craved retribution, slow, burning, utterly complete, no matter the path I had to travel, however emotionally draining the path might become. The next morning, my brother sat beside me, stone-faced. He'd been up all night, and his wife along with their children tried to find peace with his presence by offering him his favorite meal for dinner before he left for hospital. He'd spoken to Stephen, his best friend, and now he'd found out something unusual from their interaction, from their years spent together during some casual small talk, while Stephen confessed and advised him to be strong, resilient, and seek calmness since the legal course would take a big toll on me, revealing how this lawsuit was emotionally the biggest of all he's handling in the past 20 years. The calmness felt creepy. He said that Stephen had found some pattern emerging between all the materials I'd shared, regarding his unusual fetishes about minors, and I found myself and Emily at the hospital's waiting lobby, and after being assured that we could now see Jacob for few hours, Emily ran inside his room, screaming, "He has to pay!" before breaking into tears, hugging him to never ever ever leave her or try to attempt suicide ever again. And that night, Jacob kept muttering and moaning apologies towards me before drifting off to sleep after a successful emergency surgery on a critical injury. I reached out to my family therapist too after a long break to discuss his thoughts on the issues we had between my husband and our strained relationship. "He's a predator, sis," my brother said, his voice flat. "He grooms, he manipulates, he destroys. This isn't just about Madison. I suspect this might be more sinister." His face darkened further. "And if it is sinister, I need you to prepare to handle the outcomes, especially since you have kids to protect, however sinister his deeds might unravel into." "What are you saying?" I asked him, fear crawling under my already raw skin. "What I'm saying is, we need a bigger plan that would annihilate Michael and every accomplice he might have now or had ever back then during Jacob and Emily's younger years. Whoever participated in his sinister and disgusting act needs to be held accountable." He snapped angrily, eyes cold with intensity and resolve, as he slammed his hand hard on the coffee table filled with anger, his angry words echoing the raw and angry shouts Emily expressed at the hospital premises and the anger Jacob was internalizing quietly before trying to end himself. I knew Stephen, a junkyard dog as they called him, would be ruthless in the divorce, but my brother's words, they suggested a different kind of fight, one not just for assets and custody, but for something deeper. Retribution, exposure, the complete dismantling of Michael's carefully constructed life, a destruction so intense it was like wiping out Michael and any other person from the very fabric of reality and every existing social structure. He has hidden accounts, offshore investments, a secret life I'm just starting to unravel, my brother continued. This divorce, this is just the start. Stephen would handle the legal and financial aspect, and I'd handle the rest. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over a familiar messaging platform to reach out to someone about Michael's habits of online spending and forums, his secret networks and connections online since his late teen years, and about the potential links of this ongoing affair. "Who are you texting?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "People who can make things disappear. And I need you to take an oath right now before we start our moves, that no matter how things unravel itself before us, even in most unpleasant ways, you will not cower and protect Jacob and Emily from everything. You would protect all our family, especially yours. You and Jacob and Emily have faced enough betrayals at his hand, his and other conspirators too who we may need to expose. He pressed down the screen before keeping the device gently back down again, and his tone as flat as stone again, and his eyes with cold resolve. Stephen wouldn't handle this side, this aspect. He knew a side to my husband, my cheating husband, that I might be oblivious of. As he glared with anger filled in his eyes, it felt wrong, this sinister path into the dark alleys I was now about to tread, and that I might end up losing some aspects that even the therapist can never give me back again. He knew what the therapist can't see, can't reveal, or can't guess or predict the impact this move would create in my life. Their life, especially my children's life, who also were clamoring for justice. My brother was an officer during some point in his past life. His words made an unusual weight that I was now realizing that it was more heavier, with the increasing discovery of truth in every passing second since I'd gotten hold of my cheating husband and Madison's chats, and it now made complete sense. I spent the next few days gathering intel, passwords, accounts, social media profiles. My brother had contacts he called his digital ghosts, hackers who could infiltrate anything. Together, we dug through Michael's digital life. I felt a sense of grim satisfaction watching him squirm as he started receiving mails from every site and platform he spent those adult-oriented activities, revealing his past indiscretions online. My brother was more focused on revealing the identities and accounts of his conspirators, whoever might be involved as potential harmful perpetrators that Michael's side may have introduced to or got exposed before a minor like Jacob. As the secrets unraveled themselves, I finally realized who Michael actually was. And at some point in this phase of gathering intel, Emily offered me her passwords too to see what else we might find during their outings, their activities, their interactions online over the years when she befriended Madison. My initial choice was to dissuade Emily at the very beginning since her involvement was totally unjustified, and I was scared of the after effects of the discoveries that could have harmful mental or emotional consequences later. If her past self as a preteen showed her innocence being corrupted by Michael's manipulation or the toxic words expressed by Michael or any other conspirator, her past self must not pay the heavy price for it all. But I also knew Emily wanted a taste of this hunt herself, and it was necessary, too, for her to grow past some trauma and find some form of release and validation that this revenge plot would provide to help her move ahead in life without fearing her own scars. It seemed both Emily and I were going to be very emotionally damaged in the process, no matter the choice. After witnessing the horrors that might change our psyche, her presence as our digital and offline support now seemed valuable and comforting at that time as I allowed her. This act of investigation was a cruel necessity now. What we found was far worse than I could have imagined. Michael wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar, a manipulator, a predator. Hidden deep within encrypted files were videos, photos, evidence of a dark, twisted sexual appetite that focused on young, vulnerable girls. My stomach churned. My breath caught in my throat. Was this the man I'd married? The man I'd trusted with my children? My brother, his face grim, just nodded. "I told you," he murmured. "This goes deep. We hit him hard, sis. We hit him where it hurts." I felt a chill despite the summer heat, the weight of the discoveries unsettling, frightening. Suddenly, it wasn't about my hurt feelings, or even Michael's twisted relationship with Madison. It was about the potential damage to minors he'd caused or was causing, the violation of innocence that extended beyond my own life. Stephen was working tirelessly on the legal front, but my brother and the digital ghosts were working in the shadows, a silent, efficient force, building a dossier of evidence against Michael. Every click, every line of code was a brick added to a massive wall that was about to fall on my husband, my kid's father, and this revelation made me wonder, what have I become, and where am I taking myself and the kids into the future? This sense of revenge suddenly became a big burden on my conscience. I felt my body shivering, my soul sinking. It took us 2 sleepless nights and 3 days of frantic hunt on digital footprints both locally and internationally. But it became clear that he'd manipulated his and Madison's statements about how the relationship began, hiding the full truth about how many young girls over the years and young women from Jacob and Emily's social circle had gone through some similar issues, but remained silent since no one suspected Michael as the cause of all of it. We now found multiple incidents showing pattern of abuse, exploitation, and manipulation. The anger was so powerful, I tasted metal in my mouth while I had no expression but just tears rolling, and I went quiet. My heart clenched like a fist as I watched my brother's face hardened in determination at what might be unraveling to a sinister depth that might be impossible for us to recover even if Michael was put behind bars. The thought of facing the families now was so daunting and overwhelming that it added to the mental stress for both of us. I just needed a break from it all for some time now. And Stephen kept reassuring that his team would handle everything legally if we can procure even smallest amount of evidence from multiple victims. The initial reports we prepared based on digital trail we recovered was ready to present before authorities for child endangerment crimes. It looked damning now, the evidence strong enough to build an actual prison time case for Michael. The legal team felt confident about pursuing charges, while they began the tedious process of procuring warrants, filing legal orders against any possible tampering, gathering witness reports. My focus was still on exploiting initial vulnerability first, focusing on both academic dishonesty of Madison and Michael, exploiting Jacob's mental distress. We began our plot by informing Jacob's school and his teachers. I also had an idea: to reach out to all of my relatives from my extended maternal and paternal side who were part of judicial system. They could guide, advise, and give a heads up about any major move, to expedite certain proceedings, if we choose any aggressive strategy. Jacob's therapist called and asked to visit my brother's place along with the school psychologist too as part of welfare visit, concerning recent events and Jacob's breakdown at the hospital premises, and the subsequent therapy session I scheduled with his consent after he returned home the previous day before going for an overnight school trip with friends. Emily tagged along to be near him as they drove off, unaware that Jacob was just silently fuming at every message sent and received by Michael to his contacts, since Michael now knew the kid's location from his GPS tracker, which my brother could thankfully tamper too with. Night shifts pretending to travel internationally or be at conferences, and Madison's mother discovered some disturbing fetish materials hidden in Madison's dorm rooms of bondage tools. I still remembered Michael using that schoolgirl outfit, and Emily helped in retrieving those materials back from Madison's college friends who she entrusted with for safety. My brother and I also had some conversations and finally agreed to go out and hunt for the women and young girls in Michael's past. Stephen strongly advised against it, since it could be risky since Michael still remained legally the custodial guardian. We met in coffee shops, park benches, sometimes even their cars. Each woman and young girl, their ages varying between early 20s and early 30s, carried a burden of hidden pain that I felt myself, and they were victims of insidious abuse too, involving sexual advances, threats, manipulations by Michael, using different methods. Some broke down sobbing as they described their encounters, and others glared at us coldly from a distance as some kind of threat before suddenly running off from the vicinity. One woman, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with quiet rage, revealed, "He likes them young, innocent. He acts like their savior and offers guidance that none of us ever received earlier from male figures during younger age in our household from father or brothers." Then she trailed off, shaking her head. Emily, who was sitting silently throughout with clenched teeth at these revelations, expressed, "He and Madison have to pay for this, no matter how weird the path, and no matter how many people and their reputation need to become public for him and her to pay up." "Yes, they will, Emily," her uncle reassured her, nodding, his face filled with vengeance. As another person came over, also having similar experiences, shared what he had endured in quiet voice, almost at breaking point from the abuse and exploitation. It added another dimension to Michael's sins. Their stories were eerily similar, each echoing the cruel methods he'd used with Madison, building trust, offering mentorship, exploiting vulnerabilities, and then isolating and humiliating the victim once he'd gotten what he wanted. He gave every victim a sense of shame for what they have endured, that destroyed every chance to even remotely connect with someone for companionship or intimate relationships. There were stories involving finances too, stories where his pattern started making some sense of financial irregularities using his reputation to gain access to their wealth, before making it appear as embezzlement cases after using and discarding their credit cards from local banks that his friends owned in our city and abroad, involving a complicated scam. Some of those women in our immediate circles lost their reputation, careers, marriages due to the scandals associated by it, and everyone now suddenly regretted judging and victim blaming during police and public interactions back then, after finally knowing and piecing all of it together. During the time period he and I have been married, but no one had access to these missing info. After some hours, when more people joined in to share their stories, another person called my brother privately and revealed further disturbing details of child grooming and endangerment incidences across the country and abroad that revealed Michael's pattern going back decades. Their families have been suffering silently, trying to come to terms with everything as it affected them on very psychological levels that they couldn't overcome. They even had police reports showing incidents where these affected groups were being investigated back then. It was time to gather all these testimonies and build an action plan. I felt no regret. I found no guilt now. This had long crossed into justified territory, and I'd give these other women peace too by holding Michael accountable, showing their pain to rest once and forever to help all of them start afresh with full trust and support from local communities, social circles. I sent an anonymous email to Michael. "Your world is about to crumble," I typed, a surge of icy calmness replacing my tears. And below it, a link to an online Dropbox containing only few selective redacted portions from all the testimonies of Michael's other victims about his schemes and patterns from various online channels. Not everyone joined in, out of fear from social scrutiny, but many felt the need to hold Michael accountable, as it offered a way forward to recovery and catharsis. Their identities hidden through various masking methods. Let him stew, I thought. Let fear gnaw at him. I had taken my first shot as part of First Strike, and his response or action on the news would determine next actions as we moved towards Phase 2, execution. We made an agreement together to send those unredacted accounts of evidence as multiple anonymous submissions to the investigator and prosecution team involving other affected parties' families for legal processing, their faces now etched with anticipation of sweet justice against him, and also a small tinge of fear that maybe the path I have chosen might not end pleasantly or might come with unusual consequences beyond predictions. But my face had a strange calm devoid of expression now to see the support network I had accidentally formed around myself and for my children, while our lawyers were doing their jobs tirelessly for all. Michael's reaction to the anonymous email was predictable yet pathetic. He called ranting, raving, threatening legal action for defamation. He didn't deny the accusations. He simply shrieked about context and lies. It was the desperate flailing of a cornered animal, and I found a grim satisfaction in listening to his unraveling. My brother, ever the calm strategist, recorded the call. Another piece of evidence added to the arsenal Stephen was building. I decided not to involve Stephen about the digital ghost's actions, since legal permissions and court proceedings regarding online trails and internet activity were still subject to jurisdiction boundaries, and Stephen was still figuring ways about it. I gave a choice to Emily now to continue or not. It was necessary for her to become her own version, to face her scars someday. If I continued to involve Emily in these sinister activities, since her age of early teens when Michael exploited and manipulated a child in ways I could have never been able to realize and comprehend, and this has damaged her very early foundational emotional construct of father-figure relationship in so many ways that had continued to harm Emily, even during adult years. That would manifest during other relationships that involved other people and how she perceived world. I didn't want my Emily's existence defined and limited by his act, but Emily refused to let go of this chase, as this incident now showed how little trust and support structure her family had around itself due to our aloofness. While Michael was busy making empty threats, my brother and I launched a coordinated campaign targeting his and Madison's reputations locally and abroad within our and her circles that they mingled with through strategic use of our digital intel. A slow drip feed of irrefutable evidence. It felt good at the very beginning to tarnish their names. It offered a brief sense of vengeance. However, very soon this very feeling became a painful ordeal when their online presences now transformed to an arena for public scrutiny and debate. We released portions of the testimonies, anonymized but damning. Stories of financial manipulation, of young girls groomed and discarded by him who then fell victim to other harmful individuals. Each post a calculated jab, designed to wound him professionally, personally, socially. The school administration informed that Madison's involvement in the academic dishonesty scandal, and that Michael, assisted by exploiting it, will go through an investigation which might result in her expulsion, depending on severity and depth of her involvement, based on the new statements given from Jacob and Emily. Their social circles were shocked, repulsed. His colleagues, the people Michael so desperately tried to impress, now whispered behind his back, avoiding his gaze. The carefully curated image of Michael, the successful finance guy, began to erode under social ostracization now. He was ostracized by school communities, his colleagues, professional circles, and friends of family and acquaintances. Madison, caught in the crossfire of a mess she'd happily participated in, started claiming victimhood while pleading to my son, Jacob, that she only began romantic physical aspect recently as part of manipulation, acting innocent while still blaming me as jealous ex-wife. That drove Michael towards Madison for physical comforts and intimacy, because my husband wanted her too as a woman, unlike a frumpy mom who can't keep herself and a home in presentable conditions. Madison now had to endure her mother's rage. I watched as everything began to crumble and fall. Emily was no more silent observer anymore, as Emily actively participated in the process, sharing and participating in comments threads against Madison to expose Michael and defend my character. And as his downfall continued spiraling without end, My brother made certain steps involving police investigation into some deeper truth in Michael's actions and behavior in the last 2 decades and revealed criminal charges against him after reaching out to Interpol's international unit investigating crimes involving organized criminal groups engaged in human trafficking and abuse. As evidence was made public to cause damage to his reputation, Michael was now viewed in most heinous light with criminal charges. Stephen felt overwhelmed with evidence revealing itself that began overwhelming him as he had to make changes to defense statements every alternate day. My brother was adamant on continuing to chase other trails of evidences no matter how much mental and physical hardship it might cause to him, me, or the children. Stephen could now do nothing but reassure our safety by deploying additional team to protect us. The masterstroke came when we leaked concrete financial irregularities in his business dealing, revealing fraudulent activities involving forged reports to exploit trust among his partners. Our digital ghosts outdid themselves, tracing Michael's offshore accounts that now could become inaccessible. We timed the release to coincide with several business meetings, shareholder sessions with legal firms in Europe. Michael's facade of respectability collapsed in an instant now, as he was fired after investigation. The man who prized his status, his wealth, now exposed as a fraud and predator. And he had no one to blame except himself, since every information was authentic, and legal scrutiny didn't find him not guilty this time either. Unlike earlier decades that now he had to live with and confront, since my brother already informed local media press too. As revenge plan now took a sinister turn and became less about us and more about social issues of abuse involving men and young girls and women. The news reached his close circle, the extended family of his maternal and paternal relatives. Emily's furious social media campaign against Michael and his lover, with support from a team organized by some of his victims as a campaign was designed in various ways to highlight betrayal on every social interaction that reached media too, added fuel to the flames, painting them both as villains of highest order and social outcasts, even in front of mutual friends. It wasn't just their physical relationship, it was the mental toll, the destruction left behind in each victim's life as a young child to teenage years and to present adults, unable to ever live peacefully in intimate relationship ever. And we decided to add their accounts to Michael's accounts too for scrutiny from media and judiciary. It seemed he had damaged more lives, affected families in cruel ways than I can ever make any effort to estimate or understand. My kids watched as news unfolded, unable to hide tears, and they finally whispered how it's never going to be enough, with choked voice. Michael's parents, his siblings, everyone he sought approval from turned their backs. His business partners severed ties, some threatening lawsuits, and launched lawsuits against him seeking Stevenham reparations as they'd lost millions from the financial frauds. The fallout extended far beyond our family. Women whom Michael had harmed in the past began to come forward, no longer willing to bear the shame or live in secret about it with burden and distress on them or their families. They all now had a legal team involved who'd represent them and fight to ensure proper actions were taken by the authorities, now that they know a path to reclaim some of their reputation from a very dark and troubling past involving their younger, innocent selves. I, now at this point, had no emotion about everything, since everything has been too much for me or the kids or other people. It felt emotionally intense. His fall, a slow, methodical dismantling, was so satisfying to some victims while others sought therapy. Emily became a quiet observer now too, just like me at this point in our life, with no choice except to leave everything to judiciary and my brother's team to fight all these legal battles involving Michael or Jacob or other families, since everyone was going through their respective traumas, while I provided support to Emily and Jacob by assisting in the therapy sessions for everyone's well-being and mental health, including mine and our relatives. The shame was now so great that Michael eventually had to leave his job before moving into rehabilitation, after going for an overnight session discussing his affairs and patterns that needed his immediate involvement with professional help, before seeking treatment options abroad for the family, including me, by taking therapy sessions as individual as family units. But what was done is done. Michael's world imploded on him, while Madison faced social expulsion and isolation. Emily was actively involved in the legal aspects now too, and is adamant that this is never ever enough, and the fight isn't over, and won't ever end, while Jacob stayed mostly away from all the dramas involving courts. And therapy as his treatment and recovery had no choice other than going through such unpleasant, painful ordeals, and our lawyers and social teams took care of protecting my children's reputation from social or mental damage or any media-based rumors. It was the end I hoped for. Their lives were ruined emotionally and socially, while I took the high road and found peace in therapy. And my focus was just the well-being of children, no matter how their father chose his path, And whatever may befall on Michael doesn't mean we have to end up like him or let our rage dictate actions towards other people who were involved, since most had no clue what all he and Madison had put through everyone. Either way, he needed to be locked from harming more women and girls for pleasure or profit, or any combination of such perverse reasons, while I made a small community supporting his victims and raising issues about these things, and also provide pro bono financial advice for them. So Michael couldn't harm others financially like before. Once all the court proceedings end, as his case became landmark case example, to fight crimes involving internet as well as physical space that had damaging outcomes on women's reproductive rights or health, with me and my lawyer leading the front for judiciary changes and reforms as requested by all affected parties during our discussions with them when they had started finding hope now. My reputation had become more stable now, with this positive association with support groups, who also received government grants and NGO-based assistance as I shifted residence with the children before starting afresh with my children and our family, who joined in now. My children had no ill will against any parties, and I let them decide how they want to be with their father without any judgments. I had taken back a life without fear or guilt for both myself and our children by restoring dignity and justice that became an empowering journey for all of us before closing the chapter once and forever. And after a few decades, Michael reached out to me. I read but never felt to respond. The name has lost any relevance. My children are now adults who know more about handling their traumas with the help from therapy than what they went through back in those past painful years when they were still minors, and I couldn't protect them well. Emily even contacted me with Madison to catch up just briefly, but none of the past resentments are carried anymore after therapy, which now focused entirely on personal achievements of present selves, then allowing shadows to consume our thoughts in all-consuming dark ordeals. I watched as news unfolded and their achievements with smiles, filled with pride. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.